Emily had always loved autumn, but that night the chill in the air felt sharper than usual. Her small apartment in Seattle carried the kind of quiet that makes every sound echo louder. The radiator clicked faintly in her bedroom, but in the guest room down the hall, the heater barely worked at all. That was where Daniel was sleeping, or at least trying to. She could hear faint movements through the thin walls. It's a restless shifting of someone who wasn't comfortable. It had been years since she had last seen him. The boy she used to know by the lake in their hometown was now a man who carried himself with quiet steadiness. When he called her out of the blue a week ago saying he was visiting the city for work, she had surprised herself by offering him a place to stay. She told herself it was practical. Hotel prices were ridiculous, and she had a spare room. But deep down, she knew there was more to it now. Lying in bed with the blanket pulled up to her chin, Emily stared at the ceiling. Her heart wouldn't calm down. Every creak of the floor, every sigh from the guest room made her mind wander. She remembered the way he smiled when she picked him up from the airport, how his eyes softened when they talked over dinner, and how different it felt to have him sitting across from her kitchen table again, as though time hadn't passed at all. But time had passed. Too much, maybe. And yet here he was in the next room. A presence that kept her wide awake. The wind rattled against the window pane, and she shivered. She thought about the thin blanket she had left in the guest room, the old one she never used anymore. It wasn't enough for this kind of cold. She imagined him there, lying awake, uncomfortable, polite enough not to complain. Daniel had always been like that, quietly enduring things, never asking for more than he was given. She rolled over, frustrated with herself. She should sleep. It was late. But the thought wouldn't leave her alone. Maybe it was the weather. Maybe it was the memories. Maybe it was simply the strange closeness of the situation, but before she could talk herself out of it, she found herself slipping out of bed. Her bare feet touched the cold floor, and she hesitated, standing there in the dark. What exactly was she about to do? She almost laughed at herself. This was Daniel, her old friend, someone who had once been a constant in her life. Still, her heart beat faster as she walked down the hall. The silence around her thick and heavy. She stopped in front of the guest room door. A faint sliver of light from the street lamp outside cut across the hallway, brushing against the wood. She lifted her hand, knocked softly, and held her breath. There was a pause, then a low voice from inside. "Yeah." Her throat went dry. "Daniel, are you awake?" The door creaked open a little, and he looked at her, his face calm but his eyes a little tired. He must not have slept much. He leaned against the doorframe, dressed in a plain t-shirt, his hair slightly messy. For a moment she forgot what she had meant to say. She stopped, gathering courage. "I know it's freezing in here. The heater barely works." He gave a small shrug. "It's not too bad." But she knew he was lying. She could see it in the way he rubbed his hands together, the way his shoulders looked tense. She shook her head lightly, smiling, though her nerves were buzzing. "There's space in my room. The bed's big enough. You don't have to stay in here and freeze." The words were out before she could take them back. She wasn't sure what she expected, maybe for him to laugh, maybe for him to politely decline. Instead, he just looked at her. And in that silence, she felt her stomach twist. Had she gone too far? Was this strange? Trying to cover her nerves, she added quickly, it's just practical. It's warmer in there." The pause stretched longer. His eyes didn't leave hers, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks, even as the air around them remained cold. Then, at last, Daniel gave a slow nod. "All right. If you're sure." Her heart skipped. She hadn't expected him to say yes so easily. She stepped aside, letting him walk past her into the hallway. The space between them felt suddenly small, filled with old memories and unspoken thoughts. She led the way back toward her room, her mind racing faster with every step. The bed looked different, now too big, too intimate, suddenly unfamiliar in her own eyes. She slid back under the blanket, pulling it up quickly as if that would calm her nerves. Daniel climbed in on the other side, moving carefully, leaving space between them. The mattress dipped slightly under his weight, and that small shift made her pulse quicken. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the radiator and the sound of their breathing. The streetlight outside cast a pale glow across the ceiling. Emily turned her head just enough to see him lying there, eyes closed, though she could tell he wasn't sleeping yet. She froze, her body tense. Her thoughts tangled between relief, nervousness, and something she couldn't quite name. And in that stillness, as the night pressed on, she realized one simple truth: nothing about this moment felt ordinary. The silence in the room stretched like a thread pulled too tight. Emily lay on her side, staring at the faint outline of the curtains against the wall. But she could feel Daniel's presence beside her, steady and quiet. The blanket covered them both, yet the space between them felt heavier than the cold air outside. She told herself it was fine, that it was nothing unusual. Friends could share a bed, especially when one was freezing in the guest room. Still, her heart raced as though something unspoken had already changed between them. She shifted slightly, hoping movement would ease her nerves. But every sound, the rustle of fabric, the creak of the mattress only, reminded her of how close he was. She thought about all the nights years ago when they sat by the lake in their hometown talking about everything and nothing. Back then, silence had been easy with him. Now it was different. This silence carried weight, memories, questions, in 1,000 words, neither of them dared to say. Daniel finally broke it. His voice was low, almost careful. "Are you sure you're comfortable with this?" The question hit her chest harder than she expected. She turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes in the dim light. "Of course," she answered quickly, though her voice wavered more than she wanted. "It's just warmer this way. That's all." He gave a small smile, the kind that didn't fully reach his eyes. "You always say things like that." Emily frowned softly. "Like what?" "Like you're making decisions for everyone else, not for yourself." The words caught her off guard. She hadn't expected him to notice, let alone say it out loud. She tried to laugh, brushing her hair back nervously. "Maybe I just like being practical." Daniel's gaze lingered on her, steady and unreadable. Then he nodded, settling back into the pillow. The silence returned, but it was different now. She could feel his words hanging in the air, like they had opened a door she wasn't ready to walk through. Her mind wouldn't stop replaying everything. The summer he left for college, the last time they hugged, the almost confession he made by the lake that she never answered. She remembered the way his voice trembled then, the way she had pulled back because she was too afraid of what it meant. She had told herself it wasn't the right time, that they would always have more chances. But life had moved quickly, and chances had disappeared. Now here he was, inches away, close enough to reach out, yet somehow farther than ever. Emily swallowed hard, forcing herself to breathe evenly. "You didn't have to come back here. You know," she whispered, unsure why the words slipped out. "You could have stayed at a hotel. It might have been easier." Daniel turned his head toward her again. His eyes were calm, but there was something deeper there, something she couldn't quite read. Easier doesn't always mean better. Her chest tightened. She didn't know how to respond, so she stayed quiet, letting his words sink in. She wondered what he meant. Whether he was talking about tonight or about something much bigger about them. The air between them grew heavier. She could feel warmth radiating from his side of the bed, but she didn't dare move closer. Every part of her wanted to ask him what he was thinking, what he remembered, whether he still felt the same way he once did. But fear held her back. She didn't want to ruin the fragile calm that existed between them now. Daniel shifted slightly, the mattress dipping again. He turned on his side, facing her more directly. "Emily," he said softly, and her name in his voice made her chest ache. She met his eyes, her own wide with uncertainty. "Do you ever think about the past?" he asked, her breath caught. She had been waiting for this, dreading it and longing for it all at once. She nodded slowly. "I do," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "More than I'd like to." He studied her face for a long moment, then sighed, his expression unreadable. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if things had been different back then." Emily froze, her heart pounding louder than the wind outside. She knew exactly what he meant. That summer evening by the lake, when he had looked at her with so much hope and she had turned away. That night had stayed with her for years, tucked into the back of her mind like an unopened letter. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her throat felt tight. She wanted to tell him she thought about it too, that she regretted being afraid, that she still remembered the look in his eyes. But the words tangled inside her. Instead, she whispered, "So do I." The silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It was full of memories, of what-ifs, of feelings neither of them had spoken aloud in years. Emily felt like the air itself was pressing against her skin, urging her to say more, to ask him what he truly meant. But the weight of the moment kept her still. Daniel finally leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I guess we'll never know," he said quietly, almost to himself. Those words pierced her. She wanted to reach for him, to stop him from closing the door on what they had left unsaid. But her hand remained frozen beneath the blanket. Her body caught between longing and fear. She turned her face toward the ceiling, blinking against the sting in her eyes. The sound of his breathing beside her was steady, calm, but she knew he wasn't asleep. She could feel the tension in the air, the same pull she had felt years ago by the lake dot, and as the night dragged on, Emily realized something she hadn't wanted to admit. The silence between them was no longer safe. It wasn't the silence of two friends lying side by side. It was the silence of two people standing on the edge of something fragile, something powerful, something that could change everything if either of them dared to take the next step. She closed her eyes tightly, clutching the blanket. She didn't know if she wanted to move forward or stay frozen in this moment forever. But deep down, she knew the truth, one way or another. Tonight had shifted something between them, and there was no going back. Emily couldn't remember the last time she felt so restless in her own bedroom. The shadows cast by the streetlight danced softly on the walls, making the room feel smaller, more intimate. Every sound has soft breathing, the faint creak of the bed. The distant hum of traffic seemed amplified, filling the space between them with an almost unbearable tension. She lay frozen, her hand clutching the edge of the blanket, her mind spinning with memories, regrets, and unspoken desires. Daniel's presence beside her was both comforting and maddening. She could feel the warmth radiating from his side of the bed, a gentle reminder that he was real, that he was here. Oh, yes. And yet the emotional distance felt insurmountable. Her thoughts flickered to the past, to the way he had looked at her all those years ago, the way his gaze lingered just a little too long, full of hope and fear at the same time. She remembered that summer evening by the lake, the way the sunlight had caught his hair, the way he had almost touched her hand. She had turned away, too scared to face what her heart wanted. And the memory still haunted her, now lying inches away from him. She could feel every unspoken word between them pressing against her chest. The tension was electric, yet silent. She wanted to reach out to bridge the space between them, but the weight of years apart, of what could go wrong, held her still. Daniel shifted slightly, and the mattress dipped with his movement. His face turned toward her, his eyes catching the faint glow from the window. "Emily," he said softly, and the sound of her name in his voice made her heart skip. It was the same name he had called her all those years ago, but now it carried something heavier, something she hadn't expected. She met his gaze, and in that moment, it felt as if time had paused. The world outside the room disappeared. The wind, the cars, the quiet hum of the city, all irrelevant. All that mattered was the man lying beside her, the memories they shared, and the feelings that had been buried for far too long. "Do you ever think about that summer?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Her throat tightened. She could feel the blood rushing to her face, and she nodded slowly. "I do," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "More than I probably should." He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. And then he said something that made her chest tighten even more. "I've thought about it every single day." The words hit her harder than she expected. She had imagined many scenarios over the years, him forgetting, moving on, leaving the past behind, but never this. The reality of his feelings, the confession that wasn't meant for tonight, filled the room with a new kind of tension. Emily swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. She wanted to tell him she had thought about him too, that she had regretted every moment she let fear control her, that she had carried the memory of him like a secret she could never share. But the words lodged in her throat, heavy and uncooperative. Daniel shifted again. Closer this time, though still leaving space between them. "I wonder if things would have been different," he said quietly. "If we had just tried." Back then, her heart pounded violently. She wanted to answer, to reach for him, to close the gap that seemed smaller yet impossibly wide. She wanted to say yes, that she had always felt the same, that she had always longed for this connection. But instead, she whispered, "I think about that too." The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was heavy, yes, but also full. Full of all the things they had never said, full of the feelings they had tried to bury. Full of a longing that neither had acknowledged in years. Emily could feel the pull between them, a gentle tug that threatened to sweep her off her feet if she let it. Daniel exhaled slowly. A quiet, deliberate sound that seemed to release years of tension. "I'm glad I came back," he said, almost as if testing the words in the air. Emily's heart clenched. She wanted to laugh, to cry, to say something that would match the weight of his confession. But all she could manage was a soft, "So am I." The mattress dipped again as he shifted slightly, turning even more toward her. Their shoulders were almost touching now, the small gap between them closing like it had been meant to all along. Emily could feel his warmth seeping into her. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to relax into it. Just a little. Memories of their childhood floated through her mind, carefree afternoons. Shared secrets, laughter that had once felt endless. She realized that the connection between them had never truly broken. Time and distance had stretched it thin, yes, but it had never disappeared. And now, lying here, she understood that what she had felt all those years ago was still alive, just waiting for the right moment to be acknowledged. Daniel's voice broke through her thoughts again, quieter this time, more intimate. "I never stopped caring about you, Emily." Her chest tightened so violently that she felt like she might cry. She had imagined this moment in her mind countless times. But reality was different, more intense, more real, more frightening. She wanted to tell him that she hadn't stopped caring either, that every memory of him had been a mix of warmth and pain, that she had carried a piece of him with her all these years. But instead, she simply turned her face slightly toward him, allowing herself to meet his gaze fully. The room felt charged, electric, as if the world had contracted to just the two of them. "Daniel," she whispered, and the sound of his name on her lips was a confession in itself. He reached out slowly, hesitating for just a moment before letting his fingers brush against hers under the blanket. The contact was light, almost tentative, but it sent a jolt through her body. Every nerve seemed alive, every memory, every longing amplified in that single touch. Emily's heart raced, but she didn't pull away. She wanted this moment. She wanted him. And yet the fear lingered, the fear of ruining everything. You're moving too fast, of facing feelings that had been buried for too long. But the warmth of his hand, the weight of his presence, the honesty in his eyes, made her realize that some risks were worth taking. They lay there side by side, their hands almost touching. The silence now gentle, tender, and full of possibility. Emily understood something important in that moment. The past didn't have to define them. The mistakes, the regrets, the fear, they could leave those behind. Tonight was different. Tonight was theirs, and as she felt his steady breath next to her, she allowed herself to hope. Hope that the distance of years could be bridged. Hope that the unspoken words could finally be shared. Hope that this night, this fragile, delicate night, could be the beginning of something neither of them had dared to imagine until now. For the first time in years, Emily let herself believe in the possibility of them. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, whether their feelings would last or fade, But she knew that this moment, this closeness, this honesty, this quiet intimacy was real. And in the stillness of the room, with Daniel beside her, she realized that sometimes the most important steps were the ones taken quietly, without certainty, with nothing but hope and courage in your heart. And in that unspoken understanding, everything had already begun to change. The night had grown deeper, yet the room felt warmer than it had when Emily first walked in. The faint glow of the streetlight painted soft patterns on the walls, illuminating the small, intimate space they now shared. Emily lay on her side, close enough to feel Daniel's presence, but careful not to cross an invisible line. Her chest felt tight with anticipation, fear, and a strange excitement she hadn't felt in years. Every second stretched and compressed at once. Each breath a quiet reminder that something significant was unfolding between them. Daniel's steady breathing was a constant rhythm beside her, comforting yet stirring a longing she could no longer deny. Her mind replayed all the moments from the past childhood summers, shared secrets, and the afternoons spent walking through the park talking about dreams they had never pursued. Each memory was sharp and vivid, a reminder of how deeply their lives had once intertwined. But now, this wasn't just memory. This was real, tangible, and unfolding in front of her, with him inches away. Emily turned her head slightly, just enough to catch the faint curve of his face in the dim light. His eyes were closed, but she could see the gentle rise and fall of his chest. The calmness that contrasted with the storm of emotions inside her. She wanted to reach out to brush a stray strand of hair from his forehead, but fear held her back. What if she misread this moment? What if she acted too soon? The thought of ruining the delicate balance between them made her heart pound even faster, but the pull she felt toward him was irresistible. She could no longer pretend it was just about warmth or convenience. The simple act of lying beside him had awakened a flood of emotions she had buried for too long. She remembered how she had always felt safe with him, how his presence alone could calm the restlessness inside her. And yet, this wasn't the safety of childhood. This was grown-up life, complicated, fragile, and full of unspoken desires. Daniel shifted slightly, his hand brushing against hers beneath the blanket. The contact was light, tentative, but it sent a jolt through her body. Emily's heart raced, and a small gasp escaped her lips before she could stop it. He opened his eyes slowly, catching her in the dim light, and she froze. There was a softness in his gaze, a quiet acknowledgement of what neither of them had said aloud but both had felt for years. "Emily," he whispered, his voice low and steady, yet carrying an emotion that made her chest ache. "I'm glad I came back." Her breath caught. She wanted to speak, to tell him that she had been waiting for this, for him, for a chance to feel close again. But words felt inadequate, too fragile for the depth of what she felt. Instead, she whispered back, "So am I." The silence that followed was different from the ones before. It was warm, charged, and full of possibilities. Emily could feel the tension in the air, not the kind that made her anxious, but the kind that made her aware of every small movement, every unspoken thought. She realized that this night was more than a reunion. It was a reckoning, a quiet acknowledgement of everything they had left unsaid and the chance to start over. Daniel turned slightly, facing her more directly now. Their shoulders almost touched, and Emily could feel the steady warmth radiating from him. She felt herself relax just a little, letting the comfort of his presence wash over her. Memories of their shared past, the laughter, the arguments, the promises surfaced again. But now they carried a new weight. They weren't just memories. They were the foundation of something that could be rebuilt. "I never stopped caring about you," Daniel said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air, heavy and sincere. Emily's chest tightened. She had imagined hearing those words for years, but reality was far more intense than any fantasy. She wanted to respond, to confess that she hadn't stopped either, that she had carried him in her heart all this time, that every fleeting thought of love she had tried to ignore had always led back to him. But instead, she stayed still, letting the moment speak for itself. The room was filled with a quiet energy, It's an almost tangible current that made it impossible to focus on anything else. Emily could feel every beat of her own heart, every subtle movement he made, every breath shared in the intimate space between them. It was a feeling of closeness, yet also of suspense, as if they were both standing on the edge of something monumental without knowing what would happen next. Daniel's hand shifted again, this time brushing her fingers more deliberately. The touch was gentle, unassuming, yet it carried a promise of understanding, of connection, of something neither of them wanted to let go. Emily's hand twitched slightly in response, not pulling away, not yet, allowing herself to acknowledge the warmth, the reassurance, the unspoken bond they shared. "You've changed," she murmured finally, unable to hold back the words any longer. He smiled faintly, a mix of nostalgia and something deeper she couldn't name. "So have you," he replied softly. "But some things haven't changed. Not how I feel about you, not how I've missed you." Emily felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. It wasn't sadness that threatened her, but the overwhelming weight of years lost and feelings unspoken. She swallowed hard, pressing her lips together, and turned her face slightly toward the wall to gather herself. The fear that had gripped her earlier was gone, replaced by a tender hope, the kind that comes quietly, without fanfare, but lingers in the heart. "I was scared," she admitted after a pause. "I didn't know how to tell you, how to face what I felt." Daniel's gaze softened. "I know," he said simply. "I was scared too. But being here now, it feels right." The room seemed to shrink around them, every sound outside fading until all that remained was the shared rhythm of their breathing and the subtle warmth that had grown between them. Emily realized that tonight was more than a night. It was a turning point, a moment where fear had given way to courage, where hesitation had made room for possibility for the first time in years. Emily allowed herself to feel completely present, completely vulnerable, without the need to hide behind logic, politeness, or practicality. She understood that the past could not be changed, but the future was theirs to shape, one quiet, careful step at a time. Daniel shifted closer, their shoulders brushing fully now. Emily didn't move away. She felt the tension dissolve into something gentler, softer, a shared understanding that words weren't always necessary. They lay there, side by side, allowing the comfort of presence, the intimacy of silence, and the quiet reassurance of connection to fill the space between them. "Whatever happens next," Daniel said softly, almost to himself, "we face it together." Emily turned her head toward him, her eyes reflecting a mix of relief, hope, and something tenderly fierce. "Together," she agreed, her voice steady this time, carrying a weight it hadn't held for years. And in that shared understanding, in the quiet of the night, they both realized something profound. Life was unpredictable, love was complicated, and the future was uncertain. But in this moment, with the warmth of each other beside them, they had found a fragile, precious certainty. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt completely open, completely alive, and completely willing to step into whatever came next. And as she listened to the steady rhythm of Daniel's breathing, she knew that no matter what the morning brought, this night had changed everything. The unspoken words, the long years apart, the fear and longing, all had led them here. And here, in the quiet intimacy of shared presence, Emily finally understood that some moments are more than just memories, they are beginnings.